October 17th, 2025, Hans Niemann, the villain of chess, makes the history once again by defeating Abhimanyu Mishra and stopping his 71-game unbeaten streak. In these 71 games, Abhimanyu, world's youngest ever chess grandmaster, played world's very best chess players, among them beating reigning world champion Gukesh. What a day it was at the 5th round of the US Chess Championships. Absolutely stellar performance by Hans. Study-like game. And the battle is heating up. Now we have 3 leaders among the open section. And we also have the change of leaders, or catching up, I should say, probably, among the women. I'm gonna present to you 6 games for today. So let's get into it. I also want to mention my favorite player, Andy Woodward, also wins in a very stylistic fashion. Although, let's start with Hans against Mishra. E4, E5, Knight F3, Knight to C6. We have Italian on the board, Bishop to C4, Bishop goes to C5. Now, just for the little bit of context, Hans and Mishra played each other at the FIDE Grand Swiss in a critical game, and that time Hans decided to go for D4. And in this game, actually, Hans went into confession booth and considered his opening preparation a success. So C3, we have so-called Juko piano on the board, short castle, knight bd2, bishop b6, bishop b3. Knight goes to e7, knight to c4, going for this dark squared bishop. In general, this idea of knight e7 and transferring the knight to b6, g6 is quite common. Bishop b6, I would say, is also quite common to take measures against either d4 or b4. Bishop retreats back to b3, knight e7, knight c4, knight goes to g6, rook to e1, rook goes to e8, bishop c2. So both sides so far are getting ready for the battle here. And after c6, knight takes that dark square bishop before it escapes back to c7, a takes b7, and white takes control of the center with d4. Pawn to b5, h3. Now, Hans in the confession booth mentioned that h6 here was slight inaccuracy. Apparently, d5, according to the computer, is better way to equality. But here, bishop g5. Anyways, this is a very complex theoretical battle. So let's get back into the game here. h6, a3, bishop d7, bishop e3, queen c7, knight to d2. Again, both players are here playing somewhat reserved, I would say. And d5, this is where the fist fight gets on the way. D takes e5, queen takes e5, bishop to d4. Now queen to f4, pawn goes to g3, queen returns back to d6, and bishop takes f6, queen takes f6. I was thinking that here white was gonna take on d5, but little do I know, apparently after cd, even though this pawn structure is quite weakened, black's position is still comfortable due to, I assume, the weakening of the kingside pawn structure. So Hans goes f4, allowing bishop takes h3, but if that is the case, then queen h5. Apparently now, then let's say bishop retreats back, pawn to e5, and queen has to retreat back, after which white will regain the pawn back with bishop g6. So on f4, Mishra takes the bite at the bullet. Knight takes f4, g takes f4, queen takes f4. Already we have a wild position on the board. Black has sacrificed a knight here, a minor piece, and look at the white king. That looks very scary. Queen goes e2, d takes e4, knight takes e4, and bishop takes h3. Black has 3 pawns for the minor piece here, namely the knight, but apparently it is not going to be so easy here to either push those pawns or create any realistic attacking chances to the white king, who is running naked in the living room. Now queen goes f2, queen get traded because apparently if queen moves, then let's say after knight g3, as crazy as it may look, white is the one who has more activity on the king side. King h2, not sure whether trade or maybe like rook g1 or knight f5, for example, and white king is completely safe somehow. Queen takes f2, king takes f2, rook d8, and we are in for an endgame here. Minor piece versus three connected passed pawns. Knight goes to d6, a very accurate here move to start this technical phase of the game. Rooks get traded, and rook d6 is not possible because rook e8 would be a checkmate. So pawn goes to b6, bishop f5 to offer the trade of the bishops. Now, knight is probably more annoying piece to deal with, so Abhimanyu decides to take the knight instead of the bishop. So after bishop takes h3, rook takes d6. Computer evaluates this as 0 zeros, basically equality, complete equality, but for a human mind, this is nothing but the equality. Right, rook e4, pawn goes to g6, rook b4, bishop back to f1, and after f5, c4. So we are already in for a race here. Rook d4, rook returns back to b3, checks included here, and b takes c4. Rook takes pawn. We already have an imbalance on one side of the board here. This a pawn, as you will see, is going to be forced to be reckoned with. King goes to d6 to defend this pawn, king d2, and an important element before here was now Abhimanyu was down to 1 minute, but this is move 40. So players reach the time control. Just to remind you, after 40 moves, players get an additional 30 minutes added to their clock. Okay, so rook b8, pawn goes to g4, rook goes to h8 to attack this pawn. Apparently the first inaccuracy here was rook to e6, g3 would have been better, and immediately running for the king side here, potentially then f4, king f4. It is so hard to wrap the head around what is exactly going on here, even for the computer, not for the human. But rook e6, I would say, is the normal human move to not give pawns. Bishop takes c4, rook g6, and standing behind the pawn to push this pawn forward. Now king runs towards stopping the pawn here. If g3, the idea is rook g8, trading rooks here, and then king is going to be able to stop these pawns, and this a pawn will chain the king to the queen side. So f4 check, king goes back to f2. As you can see, computer says that's an inaccuracy. King e2 apparently was better for some reason. Pawn goes to g3. Apparently king e5 was a better move here. King goes to g1, king e5, and rook e8 check. Apparently bishop back to e2, trying to move it to f3 would have been better. Rook e8 check, king d4, and then bishop e2. c5, now powerful move here. The idea is to go rook b6 and win the b2 pawn. a4, and the first real mistake, not Real Madrid, not Real Madrid, real mistake here, c4. Now, why is this a mistake? Apparently, after rook d8, black is going to lose that pawn on c4, but look at the white king. Now, who is winning here? It is honestly very unclear to me. Computer says that white, rook d3 check, and this was, I think, a very important point here. So if white was to play immediately bishop d5 here, apparently then g2, well, nope. That's what they were saying, but apparently rook f6 here, and now he's gonna try to push g pawn first and then f pawn, rook g8 for some reason, rook f5, and this is equal. I still don't understand exactly why there, but f3, rook d3 check, very precise. King goes to e4. The reason why rook d3 is a precise move is because king can go to if king goes to f4, now bishop d5 is going to be the case. Okay, f2 check, and then king g2, and these pawns are blocked, and then bishop and these two pawns on the queen side are going to decide the game. So rook d3, forcing the king to e4 and not on f4, and after a5 g2, if let's say, oh, this is what Hans was mentioning actually in the interview. If white played a5 here immediately, g2, then rook d3 check, and king can go to f4, and after king g3 on the next move, suddenly it is black who is winning this. Okay, so rook d3 check is involved, so king cannot go to f4, then a5. Now g2 apparently is another fatal inaccuracy here. The precise move apparently would have been h5, and if a6, then the move is, I think, h4. And Hans was mentioning this in the interview, that what if white takes rook f3? But if white takes rook f3 here, this is crazy, because if you take with the king a7 and pawn promotes, okay, and rook has no way to stop it, okay, with the check, and this pawn promotes with the check, so there's no way to stop it, and no time for rook d6 and delivering the checkmate, because again white promotes with the queen, with the check, promotes queen with the check. So rook d3 check, king e4, then a5, pawn goes to g2, rook to d1, another very precise move. King goes to e3, now rook e1 check, king goes to f4, and bishop d5. The point is, if king g3 is played, well, there's rook e3, but if rook g5, which is what happened in the game here, threatening to go rook h5, and then rook h1, where black may have winning chances here, bishop takes f3. Computer says this, calls it a brilliancy, but I think leading to this moment, the entire play was brilliant by white and by Hans. Bishop takes f3, king takes f3, rook goes to a1. So yes, these pawns are way farther advanced, namely this pawn on g2, but white king is there to stop it. So now black king is going to be very far away to catch these white pawns. And there is no rook h5, because rook a3 check now is going to kick the king away. So after rook a1, now black tries to run back to catch these pawns, but now the second pawn, b4, king d5, b5. Again, if white was to press a6 here, then rook g8, and black would be on time here to catch these pawns, for example, like that. So another very precise play here, b4, king d5, b5, king c5, b6. Power of the connected passed pawns. King goes back to c6, now rook c1 check. I think a6 was also winning there, but rook c1, king b7, rook c7 check, king goes into the corner, a6, threatening the checkmate. So king did make it in the corner, but now rook is going to be tied to defending the 8th rank, and white will be able to take all the black's pawns here first, defending the b6 pawn. Now this pawn is going to be lost after rook h2, because rook does not have time to go for these pawns after, well, first of all, there is an immediate checkmate. Actually, during the game, I was thinking then would be a checkmate, but if rook takes b6, that's not a checkmate. So I guess rook h8 is the case here to deliver the checkmate. King moves in the corner, rook takes the pawn, then defends these two pawns, and what a finish. You have to see this game until the end. King comes into the c6, then b5, rook comes to the c file, and a very stylistic win here. Rook c8 check, sacrificing the rook. I believe that is actually the only way to win this, or is a7 also winning? I think a7 might also be winning, but rook c8, and the point is after takes b7 check, and if king was to go to a7, you cannot promote to a queen, because that is going to be a stalemate. King cannot go anywhere, right? You cannot promote to a rook, because again that's a stalemate, but he promotes to a bishop or a knight actually, which both would be winning. And to add to the drama, Hans picks up bishop and knight both in his hand, showing Mishra that he had to resign long time ago. But I also kind of understand here why he would not, especially after having not lost in 71 classical games. That is bizarre to wrap head around, especially when you play world's very best players. So king goes to b8, king b6, and now the a7 checkmate is unstoppable. Rook c6, king c6. If there was no rook, black rook, it would be a stalemate. But since there is the rook, this now is going to be lost, because rook c6, king c6, and then your king can escape to a7, and now white is going to promote. And if rook c7, which is what was played in the game, a7 delivers the checkmate. What a game this was. Again, an absolute cinema. One of the wildest game, in my opinion, that I have seen in a recent time. And what an execution by Hans. Definitely a statement win. Now, let's see another game that I was very happy to see. Sam Sevian, a very strong 2700 player. He's been very close to 2700. It has crossed 2700 a few times here, and is right under at 2698 against Andy Woodward. Andy has not been having a very good tournament here. He was 1 out of 4 before this game, and let's see how this played out. So we have English opening on the board, and after d5 here, cd5, knight takes d5. This is basically a reversed Sicilian. Okay, short castle, knight to b6. This apparently is called King's English variation. Pawn to b3, quite popular theory here. Bishop e7, bishop goes to b2 to attack this pawn. f6, pushing e4 here is not that great, because, well, first knight can go here, but this pawn now on e4 is going to be target, for example, with the bishop and the pawn on d3 on the next move. Okay, so after bishop b2, f6 to defending, knight to a3. Very interesting way to approach this. Knight c3 is also a move here, which I myself have actually played. There are some lines where black just sacrifices the pawn there to play knight b5 on the next move to regain it back. But anyways, knight to a3 was played in the game, and after bishop e6, this knight comes to c to support d4. After queen d7, immediate d4 would allow pawn to e4 and kicking away, and then f5, which is probably not that great for white. So Sam plays e4 first. Let's turn on here the evaluation bar. e4, and now next d4 is going to be unstoppable. Bishop goes to c5, pawn goes to d4, e takes d4, knight takes d4, bunch of minor pieces get traded here, bishop to g4, knight f3, and after short castle, queen c2, we have the position slight pawn structure imbalance here. White has 4 pawns on the king side, so pawn majority on the queen side, black has pawn majority on the queen side. So while the position is quite balanced, I think white is slightly to be preferred due to the activity here, and this fianchetto bishops establish a little better coordination. Then rooks to come in the center also, either d1 e1 or c1 d1. Technically white is a little better here, but we'll see how it plays out. So apparently this move, rook d1, was a slight inaccuracy. Bishop c3 and keeping the rook on the e file there would have been better, but the difference there is very minor, almost unidentifiable for the human eye. h3 bishop now gets kicked back to f7, and we are back to a very balanced position. Now, I was looking at this move e5, and I was wondering actually what was gonna happen. I thought that this was white's best chance here, keeping a bishop pair, but black's position is also very solid. Although this bishop does look scary, it doesn't have that much to do at the moment, since it is facing this pawn on the c6. Okay, so knight to d4, rook comes to d8, and first step towards the wrong direction. I think Sam was not able to figure out here what the right move was. So after 10 minutes of thought, he goes for queen e2, then queen e3, and this was a very nice touch actually. Queen back to e8, and after queen e3, then queen to e5 once the queen leaves the second rank where it was defending the bishop. So now what is the point of queen e5? A very tricky move here. I think, well, first of all, threat is c5 to win the knight by this pin, right? But the real trick here was, and if you are thinking about this position, you're probably wondering why not f4 and kick the queen away? That is exactly what Sam played in a very fast manner here. This was very uncharacteristic, I would say, at this level. He makes the move in 44 seconds. Okay, 44 seconds. That is way too fast. And blunders Black's next move. I would stop the video and try to figure it out what that is if you are serious about improvement, and if you did that, yes, it is correct. Knight goes to d5. So while a lot of things are hanging here, yes, this queen is hanging, but Black creates equally strong threat. Knight goes to d5, attacking the queen on e3, attacking the pawn on f4. And if you take on e5, then knight takes e3, and now the rook is under attack, and also the bishop. But the real trick here is after e6, knight takes d1. Well, first you can include the intermediate move here with the check, take the bishop, then take the rook, and at the moment white does have two minor pieces for the rook, but the key move is c5, now pinning the knight and winning the knight. So this would be completely winning for Black. So Sam here now, I'm sure, was very disappointed, and he decides not to take on e5, but that gives up the pawn, because this knight d5 not only attacks the queen, but it also attacks the pawn on f4. Knight takes f4. Now he tried to muddy the waters here with knight c6, attacking the queen with the bishop, but after rook d1, what a move. Queen takes e4. Another very aesthetically pleasing move, as you can see, that is given a brilliancy mark, and very deservedly so. And the point is, yes, you can take bishop e4 here, but then knight takes h3 with the check. Once you move the king, knight takes f2, hitting the rook and the bishop at the same time. You have to take the knight, then b takes c6. Already Black is up 2 pawns, plus this b3 pawn is hanging, so this should be easy win for Black again. So queen e4 delivers the game basically for Black here. Knight b4, but then simply knight takes g2 after rook d4, queen b1 check. Now Black is up 2 pawns again, and most importantly, this king is completely exposed, and in view of this light squared bishop here, the game is going to be decided. Rook e8 was very nice touch, and then after bishop d5 here, rook has to sacrifice itself, because otherwise there's going to be just all kinds of threats there, and checks and checkmates, I would say. So after queen e4 there, Black has too much extra material, so Sam resigned. Luck has gone in this way, and I very much hope that this game is a turning point in his tournament, and he can pick up the energy from this game going forward in the tournament. There is still a lot of tournament left. Okay, I believe there is 6 more games to play. So those 2 games, absolute highlights, absolute bangers. Now let's see another leader of the tournament. Fabiano Caruana also wins against Darius Switch. And Fabiano goes for Caro-Kann. I'm going to go quickly through this game. Bishop f5, we have the main line of advanced variation of Caro-Kann. I believe this is called the short variation. Very simple play from both sides, and after bishop d3, basically we have French defense on the board without the light squared bishop. Okay, which a lot of times is considered a problem child in the Black's position in French. So knight c6, bishop e7 here, and Fabiano decides to castle long. Okay, now the point of going long castle here is if white starts pushing and expanding on the queen side, Black obviously says no thank you, I'm gonna close it up with c4, then b5, and after a4 king b7, and Does white have a realistic chances of attacking on the queen side here? I don't think so, because this rook is gonna come on a5. But I do think though that white's next move a5 here was an immediate fold. Basically this is offering a draw. Well, I'm gonna close the queen side here, and hoping that the king side is also not gonna open up, and we are heading towards the draw. But Fabiano, world's number 3 player and the world champion challenger, former world champion challenger, and one of the greatest players of all time, probably, that those kind of accolades don't come without a reason. So obviously he does not want a draw here. So in the next move, he opens up the position on the king side, after which white king here is simply going to get under fire. Knights come into the game. This is the real danger of playing against Caro-Kann, okay, and the dream of all Caro-Kann players. So after knight f3 here, Fabiano decides to trade 2 rooks for the queen, but the fact that the now king is completely exposed, especially queen with paired up with the knight, is a very dangerous combo. So queen now wins the game here in a relatively smooth fashion, I gotta say. After knight e3, this king is in trouble, so rook has to be sacrificed, and white could hope for the fortress here, but the point is now black is gonna play e5. I was thinking actually he was gonna go for this pawn, but he plays e5, then d4, and makes the passer on the c file, which is going to decide the game. Okay, after a couple of checks here, there's one final trick. If you do promote to a queen, this is actually going to be a perpetual check. King cannot escape checks, okay, from the 7th and 8th rank. So the final touch here, obviously, Fabiano does not allow that, takes the pawn on e5, after which the knight is going to be hanging, and then next this pawn is going to promote. So 3 leaders, just to give you an idea here. Let's take a quick look at the standings. We have Fabiano, Wesley So, and Hans Niemann tied for the first place. So it is going to be very interesting next 6 games. Tomorrow, I think the highlight of the tournament is going to be, or highlight of the round, is going to be Levon Aronian is playing Hans Niemann, who is also playing quite well here, 3 out of 5 without a loss. Okay, so Levon Aronian, another one of the greatest players of probably all time, and one of few players that has crossed 2800. Okay, now let's take a look quickly, few games here from the women's section. Going into this round, the only leader was Anna Sargsyan, but Karissa Eip now delivers a trademark game 2 times, I believe, right? Winner is she. Forgive me, Karissa, if that is wrong, but reigning US champion against the leader of the tournament. We have open Sicilian Kalashnikov variation, and very fighting line here, this Kalashnikov, as you can say from the name. If you name a line AK-47, it's gotta be for a reason, right? So a6, bishop goes to g5 to attack the queen. You cannot take because there's knight c7 check. Queen d7, knight retreats back. f4, knight goes to d5, and now I am actually not sure here why immediately push these pawns, but apparently both sides more or less here double up the pieces. Knight takes the dark square bishop. That bishop was bad because it was stuck inside the pawn chain here, but this is the prime example of bad bishop defending good pawns. Okay, so it has been traded off the board. Apparently computer does not like here castling short because of this move g4 immediately, but since the d pawn was hanging here, rook d8, and then black goes g4, but that is one move too late because now white gets her counterplay going here with b5, and after g3 simply takes that pawn, queen g5 check, and then after taking the pawn on g3 here, now white king is safer than the black king probably on the king side, and extra pawn now is gonna decide the game. c5 again, now ruining the black's center and the pawn structure. If you take queen e5, and that is going to be the game over basically with bishop c5. Bishop g4 was a desperate attempt here to create something on the king side, but Karissa shuts down that counterplay in style here. Bishop g3, bishop e5, saying that white's counterplay here is more powerful, and the g2 square is covered 3 times, so there is nothing going to be happening there. So on the next few moves, she simply cashes on the material advantage here, and on 2 moves before reaching the time control, Anna resigns. So that was I would say probably the highlight from the female section. I was going to show you 2 more games, but I do gotta go play people. All right, I have people waiting. All right, so let's take a look. Oh, Alice Lee. Okay, we have to see Alice Lee's game, then another leader. So 1 more game. Let's see. d4, d5, knight c3. By Ize, my countrywomen, we actually grew up together and have played a lot of tournaments together. Chooses to go for the Jobava London. Very dynamic and sharp opening, but something did not go right here. Apparently, instead of a long castle here, immediate g4 is better here. Goes for it 1 move too late, and now that gives black more chances here. g5, b4. It is a fist fight already on the board. Now, if you take on g6, since the king is castled on the queen side here, this is going to be a lot more dangerous for white. So knight retreats back to b1, knight goes to e4. Now you can see that this knight is going to be in a very sad situation here. Queen comes to a5, and already white's position is very unpleasant, borderline losing. As you can see, something did not go right here for white. All the pieces are on the back rank. b3 was apparently inaccurate. Knight c5 would have been much simpler, but that's also understandable. Knight b4 now threatens a checkmate on a2. Immediate checkmate. Knight a3 takes on d3. Bishop takes c5. I'm not sure actually here why this move knight b1 was not considered. I'm assuming it's because of this reason. So Aida plays knight e2, bishop b7, and then bishop e5. So instead of bishop b7, again, I'm not sure why this knight was not captured, but after bishop b7, black wants to open up the position here with d5 and use this x-ray on the file, but I think knight b1 was still possible, and if d4, knight g3, and this bishop on b7 is going to be unprotected. So that would have been best, but bishop e5 allows bishop a3, then d4. Now this bishop opens up on the diagonal, queen has to move away, knight c5, both rooks are hanging already. White is down in exchange and is gonna lose another piece that is an extra rook for black, and simply after castle, white does not have enough counterplay. So a move later here, Bagizi decides to give up. So that was another decisive game. A lot of decisive games actually in the women's section, but those were the 2 leaders of the tournament, Anna Sargsyan and Alice Lee, at the moment with 3.5 out of 5 games, and Karissa Eip, as you saw, celebrated her first victory in the tournament. So only 1 point apart them. Anything in the air in the women's section. Still, a lot of players with 2.5. First place is 3.5, so only 1 point difference. So in the remaining 6 games, anything can happen. So we are in for the cinema. As you can see, I like this meme. All right, guys, I'm out. Looking forward to the round 6 tomorrow. I'll see you then. Let me know which game you enjoy the most, who you are cheering for, and don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and do all the good things. I would much appreciate you supporting the channel. Cheers.